Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Joining me on the telecast is Mr. Prakash Joshi, who's the Union Minister for Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution and New and Renewable Energy. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Prakash Joshi. And my first question about the income tax bonanza. There is going to be no income tax up to the tune of 12 lakh rupees for taxpayers. It is the biggest tax exemption since 2005 that has been announced by the Finance Ministry in our country. Do you think this will help increase the GDP growth rate?
No, definitely it is one of the biggest relief as far as income tax concession is concerned. And I think this will definitely boost. It will not only boost savings, investment, as already Prime Minister has quoted this in his tweet. This is a multiplier. This is a force multiplier. It will increase the savings, it will increase the investment, consumption and the growth. So overall, if I can put it, this is the historic jump at once. Otherwise, 50,000, 1 lakh rupees maximum. This much was done, but this is the first time that it is almost little less than double, almost double.
There has been important focus put by the Finance Ministry in the budget towards Bihar. Whether we talk about the Makhana board that has been set up in Bihar, the Tech and Entrepreneurial Institute for Food Processing, or for that matter, we talk about the brownfield and the greenfield airports that are now going to be set up. How does this help farmers? How does this help skill development and the food processing sector? Also, do you think this is because the coalition between the JDU and the BJP, both being NDA allies now, is the reason that the government has focused on Bihar this time around?
No, overall whatever technology के लिए हम जो कुछ भी करते हैं उसमें food processing भी है, फूड प्रोक्यूरमेंट भी है, फूड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, उसमें भी हम अभी फूड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन में हम टेक्नोलॉजी उपयोग कर रहे हैं, फूड प्रोसेसिंग में हम टेक्नोलॉजी उपयोग कर रहे हैं, फूड प्रोक्यूरमेंट में टेक्नोलॉजी उपयोग कर रहे हैं. तो ओवरऑल दीज आर द थिंग्स. टेक्नोलॉजी इज नॉट दैट ओनली इट विल हेल्प फॉर द आईटी, दैट डेज हैव गॉन. नाउ इट इज हेल्पफुल टू each and every sector walk of the life.
All right, and talking about the MSMEs, talking about the startup sector, both these sectors have been given an impetus, a massive boost. How do you think it will help the country grow, especially when it comes to the 6.3% GDP growth rate that we are at? Can this help jumpstart the country's economy to maybe grow at an 8%?
One is overall MSME, as quoted by Honorable Finance Minister, 45% of the export of the country is made by the MSME. And because of both as far as the investment limit and the turnover limit which is increased in MSME, that will expand the scope of the MSME. By expanding the scope of MSME, it will generate more jobs. It will generate more revenue, it will generate almost wealth for the country, and since export will be further, growth of export will be there, that will be also added to the economy and the overall the growth of this.
There has been a special focus that has been given to shipbuilding and maritime development. How is this going to help create jobs, better connectivity, maritime routes where India can, better leverage the situation at this time, and also help in thereby contributing to the GDP of the country?
See, recycling a circular economy in India, it was not at all given any importance or the thought till श्री मोदी कुड कम. मोदी जी आने से पहले इसका कोई सोचा भी नहीं था. अभी शिप रीबिल्डिंग हो, ओवरऑल रिसाइकलिंग हो, दैट इज बीइंग गिवन इम्पोर्टेंस. फॉर एग्जांपल अभी लिथियम बैटरी में जो लिथियम रहता है इसको रिसाइकल कर सकते हैं. हमारे पास लिथियम एज ऑन डेट बहुत कम है, लेकिन इफ इट ए रिसाइकल सिस्टम, टेक्नोलॉजी यूजिंग द टेक्नोलॉजी रिसाइकल उपयोग जो है उसको बढ़ाते हैं तो नेचुरली हमारा जो इंपोर्ट ऑफ द रॉ मटेरियल होता है, मिनरल्स होता है, जो हमारे देश में लभ्य नहीं है या तो पर्याप्त मात्रा में लभ्य नहीं है, उसका हमारा जो रिसाइकल से हम हमारा जो डिमांड है वो हम पूरा कर सकते हैं.
Talking about direct taxes, talking about indirect taxes, but more importantly, the tariff cuts that have been announced. It's 7 of those tariff cuts when it comes to focusing on the export of toy and leather industry. How is this going to help manufacturers of toy and leather and other subsidiary industries to grow further?
See, one thing what I can tell you is, because Karnataka is the one of the important manufacturing hub of the toys, Chennapatna you must have heard. Along with that, recently a toy cluster has been established in northern part of Karnataka, that is near Koppal, by Modi government. See, before this, what used to happen? Almost 90% of the toys were imported from the outside. इवन मेनी ऑफ द थिंग्स, इवन जो गणेश लेके बहुत कुछ जो टॉयज, गणेश टॉय नहीं है लेकिन ऐसे जब मूर्तियां भी लेके सब कुछ टॉयज हम इंपोर्ट करते थे. आज के दिन में भारत में एक टॉयज के लिए बूस्ट देना शुरू किया 7-8 वर्ष पहले. अभी ऑलमोस्ट हमारा इंपोर्ट कम होके एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ गया है, और इस जो टॉयज क्लस्टर हम करने का भी निर्णय किया है उससे हमारा और भी एक्सपोर्ट जरूर बढ़ेगा, क्योंकि दुनिया में इसका डिमांड है. नेशनल एक्शन प्लान फॉर द टॉयज टू मेक इंडिया ग्लोबल हब फॉर द टॉयज. दिस विल डेफिनेटली बूस्ट अवर एक्सपोर्ट ऑफ द आवर टॉयज, एंड टॉयज मेकिंग इंडस्ट्री विल क्रिएट द जॉब्स, एंड टॉयज मेकिंग विल बी economic activity in India.
All right, thank you, Mr. Prahlad Joshi, for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views. Joining me now is Mr. Harish Bijur. He is a brand guru. Thank you, Mr. Bijur, for joining me on the telecast. And my first question to you about were there worry signs within the finance ministry and the government of India that they decided to slash the income tax rates and revise the tax slabs? Because even though our GDP growth rate, which is at 6.3%, is at quite a high figure as compared to the developed economies, the rate at which they are growing, do you think we are still sluggish? And for us to achieve our target of a $5 trillion economy, it is going to take more than the speed at which we are growing, perhaps at an 8% or a 9%, which we have still not been able to achieve.
Well, firstly, the key point to note is that there are worry signs on the brow of the country, fundamentally because, the GDP growth rate that we are expecting and anticipating may or may not hit. So if you're saying that India is going to grow at anything between 5.6 to 6.2%, give or take a percent here or there, I would simply say that it's a matter of worry. And I think the government has noticed this. And Prime Minister Modi has done exceedingly well in giving this kind of an open incentive for people to say that you're going to have a little more money in your hands. More money in the hand means promoting the virtuous cycle of consumption. And hopefully, the 70 or 80,000 additional rupees that the usual taxpayer might have in his or her or their pocket might come back into consumption. So that's great. But the second key point to note is that India is a nation of 573 million middle class. Now, the middle class is under stress. The middle class is typically a segment of the population that earns anything between 6 lakh per annum to 36 lakh per annum. Okay. So the thing is, it's quite a broad sway. And this kind of more money in the hands of this segment of the population is a good thing. Essentially, this applies to people up to the 12 lakh per annum kind of a situation, but even that is good. because at least it will help this class to battle inflation, which rests at about 6%. So that is a second key point which has brought in this manna from heaven of saying income tax is actually going to be on a new format.
Okay. Harish, also talking about the impetus that has been given on the MSME sector and agriculture, and particularly entrepreneurship within these sectors, when there has been credit flow that has been built up, Krishi cards that the limits have been increased from 3 lakh to 5 lakhs, women, first time women entrepreneurs, first time scheduled tribe entrepreneurs, there has been a corpus that has been set, startup industry has been given quite the push over here. Why is all of this being done? Do you think this is all part of the plan, that if you are going to build an entrepreneurial India, is the way to move forward versus the tertiary class, the service sector, which at this point of time still is the largest sector in which the Indians are earning their income from?
The key idea seems to be with Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman actually stepping out and saying that, a nation is about its people. And if a nation is about its people, it's about the entrepreneurship of its people. The budget aspires to unleash the animal spirit of every sector. And it aspires to do it in the two stressed sectors of the economy. Manufacturing is a stressed sector, as is agriculture. Agriculture more so than manufacturing. Unless and until we unleash the brute force, the brute entrepreneurship force of the manufacturing and the agricultural sector, we're not going to go anywhere, because ours is a lopsided economy when it comes to GDP. If 56% of our GDP comes from services, so be it. I mean, the entire nation is gung-ho about services. You can't eat services, my dear friends. Agri is very, very important. It needs to go beyond that 16%. We need to level things out. So agri is the most stressed, and anything that going to agri is a great thing to happen. The important point to note is how much of this money is actually going to be spent, how much of it will actually hit the road, how much of it will be used by people in the agri and the manufacturing segment to create more wealth. Because, if the money goes to take care of, loans and stuff like that, it's not money that hits the road. It's money that hits the money lender. Because please note, the agri sector and the manufacturing sector is overextended with the money lender. They don't borrow only from the formal sector banks, but they borrow from the money lender. The first money that comes to the agriculture sector and the manufacturing sector goes to the money lender. The second bit of money goes to the formal bank. And the third bit actually goes into personal savings of the individuals. We need to take care of these aspects.
Okay. And yes, on one hand, you talk about the MSME sector that is growing, corpus that has been set up to the tune of crores of rupees. On the other side, there is also equal impetus being given on skill development, on education, on innovation. How are these two sectors interlinked?
Well, they're all equally interlinked, because if you heard Nirmala Sitharaman ji saying, one is, there is the engine 1, which is agriculture. Then there's engine 2, which is MSME. And the engine 3 is innovation. All these three are important. And under innovation comes people, under innovation comes the economy, under it comes training and, skill development, etc. Important thing is we need to focus on skill development beyond the services segment. Thus far, we are bothered about the services segment and skill development. We need to be bothering about agricultural segment and skill development, manufacturing sector and skill development. It's tough to do it, but it's all about training. It's all about the infrastructure being put into place. The government cannot do this. It is the private sector that can do it. We must see enough incentives for the private sector to jump in and say, I'm going to do it. As of today, we have intermediaries, good intermediaries, who actually connect the government initiatives to the people. Now, we need a lot of these intermediaries happen. And there are good bodies in the country. I mean, some of them are 40 years old, 42 years old. Bodies like ISECT, for instance, is more than 40 years old. And they do human service at the grassroots level. We need many more of these. And we need these segments, these kind of entities to be energized. Because the government cannot do this work. It has to be done by the private sector. And the brute animal spirit of the private sector is what's going to drive this in India.
Okay, and talk, there is a massive demand, and we do not have dearth of youth to take up employment or start their entrepreneurial journeys. But here you have a massive demand, but the youth do not have the requisite skill set to fill the demands of the job. And how do you think these, like for example, the Atal Tinkering Lab for fostering scientific temperament amongst young minds, or for that matter opening up AI centers of excellence in education, do you think these are going to be important contributors in honing the skills of the youth in our country?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head in terms of skill development. Skill development is an absolutely good thing to talk about, but making it hit the road is a very, very difficult enterprise. And that's what I'm saying. You need pipes, you need intermediaries who will actually take skill development and actually train people, skill them, and actually make them hit the ground, make entrepreneurs of them, etc. India is a nation of entrepreneurship. India is a nation of shopkeepers, not Great Britain. India is a nation of shopkeepers. India is a nation of small manufacturers. India is a nation of 64 million MSMEs. And these are the guys who are going to take the business forward. And the biggest weakness of these guys is training. The second is financial reach, which is going to be abridged. And the third is the fact that they don't know marketing. I think, these three things need to be melded together. And if all this happens, I think India is going to be a beautiful story. We are not a nation of big factories and big enterprises. We are a nation of small units and small enterprises, and small is still beautiful in this country. Till the small segment prospers, India will not prosper in a real manner.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Harish, for joining us. Stay on with me. Let me also introduce my other panelists into the discussion. I have with me Jayant Krishna, former CEO and NSDC, PM Skill India Mission. Jayant Krishna, your views, and I particularly want to focus on the nuclear mission, with nuclear energy mission, where there has been a corpus set for 20,000 crore rupees. First of all, is this enough? We are aiming to build nuclear energy, renewable energy to the tune of 100 gigawatts up to 2047. Is this target achievable? Are we at this point of time pitching ourselves to an easy target? Could it be increased, or is this a step in the right direction, and more needs to be done here?
See, I would feel that, a few things that the finance minister has spoken about. She's talked about the Atomic Energy Act being amended. Primarily, my understanding is to provide space for private sector players to come in. She's talked about adequate focus on small reactors, some funds for research and development in that space, and so on and so forth. So I think India has been right from the beginning, from early years of independence itself. Nuclear energy is one area where India made a good beginning. And now, and it has continued. The sector continued to have the requisite focus. And the fact is that, now, I believe, I didn't hear that part of the budget speech, but I understand some target has also been set as to what should be the contribution of nuclear energy in our overall energy availability in the country in next few years' time, and especially by the year 2047. So I think these are, while I'm no expert on nuclear energy, but from whatever I understand, I think these are all steps in the right direction, because I see a lot of promise in that.
Right, absolutely. And moving forward from renewable energy to talking about the tourism and the hospitality sector, again, massively labor intensive sectors, and there has been a big announcement being made. When you talk about making top 50 tourist spots in the country, the government is going to make that push to allowing for incentives to be given to homestays to set up their small businesses across the length and breadth of the country. How does this gel well with the government's Make in India initiative, and also ensuring that India's tourism industry grows with leaps and bounds?
See, tourism is one sector, which has a, employment multiplier kind of an effect, And not only that, at the domestic level, it creates employment for a lot of people. But it also brings in, especially the overseas tourism tourists. They bring in a lot of foreign exchange also to the country. So it helps in multiple ways. I mean, one indication which I see, if you look at the pre-COVID, tariffs of typical 5 or 3 star hotels in the country, post-COVID, those tariffs have almost doubled. So it means that, I mean, we need more hotels, we need more destinations, we know. So I think we need to, productize, we need to package, we need to, promote tourism very well. If we do that, I mean, these 50 clusters that are being talked about, I think we can go beyond, because there are very few countries in the world which have, deserts, which have a coastline, which have, the world's tallest mountains, rivers, all kind, lot of history, heritage, and living history of, few thousand years.
Yeah.
I think we really need to capitalize it. We have so far we have not been able to realize the potential which exists for domestic tourism, as well as for people visitors coming from outside for tourism.
Okay.
Typically, we look at the triangle of Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur. I think beyond that nobody looks at. But every nook and corner of the country has amazing jewels. So much of heritage, culture, food, handicrafts. I mean, India is actually the handicraft capital of the world. But how well we have done in terms of giving them designs, in terms of skilling them, in terms of connecting them with the consumers with some portals and so on and so forth. I mean, this is a space which is crying for interventions. I'm happy some attention is being paid, and it will go a long way. I mean, it's for one person staying in a hotel, and I understand there are almost 2 people who get both, employment,
Right.
both direct and indirect employment put together.
Heavily labor intensive sectors, travel, tourism, and hospitality and F&B industry. Let me get in other panelists also into the conversation with me. I have with me Dr. Partha Chatterjee, Dean of Academics and Professor of Economics at Shiv Nadar University. Dr. Chatterjee, how do you view the budget? Obviously, the big ticket item, everybody had been talking about it for weeks together. Hints had been given by President Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi just a day before the budget. And lo and behold, we have the bonanza for the IT slabs that had been completely revised. How does this impact taxpayers, the common man, the middle class, and the economy at large?
Let me start by talking a little bit about the context of the budget, right? I mean, we have to evaluate the budget in the times that we live in. And in this year's budget, I think there are 2 things that played a big role, right? One is that India's growth rate had slowed down from above 8% to about 6.4%. And the second is that there's a lot of uncertainty across the globe. And these 2 things together kind of dictated what the budget has to be, right? And in some ways, they were contradictory to each other. And I think overall, the government has done well in balancing both these things. In terms of the consumption part, to boost the growth rate, the government had choices to do something about consumption, about investment, about government expenditure, and about exports, right? And in some ways, it has touched all of that. In particular, by reducing the income tax burden on the middle class, that has definitely ensured that there will be some boost to the consumption in the urban sector particularly. And going back to your last question to the other guest, that in terms of what has been done in the agricultural sector, I think that also will go some way, agriculture and tourism both, in some ways in both generating employment and thereby increasing income at the rural level at a larger spread across the country. and overall increase consumption. So I think
Okay.
that's
Do
definitely
you
a
think
positive
the
development.
the economy can jumpstart with a 6.3% growth rate that we have currently? We ideally would want it to be in double digits. Maybe that is wishful thinking at this point. But can this revision of tax slabs push us further towards the aim that we at this point of time are looking at?
So you're right that India has to grow at least about 8% if within the next 30 years or so India has to become a developed nation. And we really need some ideas, some big push to enable that. But in this budget, I don't think that finance minister went for anything such any such path where there's only one single engine to drive the economy, right? There are multiple small things actually which are there in the budget to enhance the growth. One, we already talked about the consumption. Two, to enhance investment. The finance minister has announced the fund of funds, also the reclassification of MSMEs. So overall, at that level, at that end of the spectrum, we are hoping that there will be a renewed increase in investment.
Okay.
In terms
Yeah, go
of,
ahead.
just to wrap that up. So I think,
Okay.
that there are multiple things there, not one single idea, but multiple things. And therefore, in terms of whether the economy goes back to the 8%, it will depend a lot on the implementation of all of that.
Okay, all right. Ayush Mudgal, partner at Deloitte India, on the telecast with me as well. Mr. Mudgal, how do you view in terms of the support that government of India is wanting to give to manufacturing units, to the industry, whether it is about medicine or drugs, or we talk about the leather industry or talk about the toys industry? Do you think it's enough that has been done, that the tariffs have at this point of time have been removed, 7 of them at this point of time? And do you think more of these industries could be brought into the ambit where the push can be given, this can be an impetus, this could be to the advantage of the industry, that they become tax free and therefore their exports increase, and thereby them turning into profitable projects for the country?
Yeah, so Megha, I think before I move on to the actual changes that were brought in the budget, I think what's also important to understand that what was expected from the budget is that, we were expecting a lot of, tariff revisions, rationalization of the rate, Philip, in terms of reduction in customs duty rates to kind of boost the domestic manufacturing. As well as certain other changes in the customs duty administration as well as compliances, which were expected to give a boost to the domestic industry. So I think on all those fronts, the union budget does not disappoint. I think, like you mentioned, there has been a rationalization of the tariff structure, which has been kind of announced. And now there would be, after this particular reduction, there would be 8 tariff rates, including zero. There would not be any products where both a cess as well as a surcharge would be levied. So I think that will go a long way in kind of reducing the customs classification disputes. What we have also seen is that the union budget gives a lot of impetus in terms of domestic manufacturing to some of the sunrise and priority sectors, whether it is, the manufacture of lithium-ion batteries, which are critical for both, mobile phone manufacturing as well as EV manufacturing, as well as sectors like solar cells, critical minerals, textiles. So all these, I think, rate changes will go a long way in giving a fillip to our domestic manufacturing and value addition, and also help to make our products, more export competitive. Which will kind of go a long way in boosting our economy as well. So yeah, and let's also not forget GST, I think, because that is also a very important transaction tax, which is added to the price. So I think on those fronts, mostly the changes were in line with, the council meetings, changes that were brought in the council meetings. But I think some very important changes were brought in to increase or kind of reduce the evasion which is currently happening, whether it is, the track and trace mechanism, which was introduced to kind of, track some of the key products. As well as certain other changes where they have made it mandatory to make a pre-deposit even on certain penalty-related matters. So I think on the indirect tax side, Megha, the budget was a good balance where we've seen rationalization of rates. We have seen certain good measures coming in for simplifying the indirect tax-related compliances. And I think there is a strong, strong message in terms of giving a fillip to the domestic value addition and manufacturing as well.
Okay, all right. I also have with me Dr. Rao, and let me get him into the conversation as well. Dr. Rao, as a layman, how do you rate the budget?
I am happy, but as a surgeon, I will say a few things about how the health industry is going to be influenced by this budget. One, there are some direct benefits. 36, if you remember, I had put out an article with 12 expectations from the health sector in the Sunday Guardian last Sunday. And one of them was to do with the basic customs duty on life-saving drugs which are not manufactured in India. And I'm happy 36 of them have been exempted from the customs duty. And the inputs for many of the drugs we are manufacturing, but the inputs for it are being, the raw material is being imported. Those have been also reduced or exempted from tax. So this will help the pharmaceutical industry, it will help the hospitals, it will help the patients, and it will also help medical tourism, bringing down the costs here. The other direct benefit that we see is the fact that there will be more medical colleges. If you remember, whenever we have had discussions on medical students going abroad, on NEET exam leakages, etc., I have always mentioned that we should increase the number of medical seats and, of course, other professional seats also, to an extent where there is no need for our students to go abroad. Instead, we start attracting students from abroad to come here and increase our incomes here. If foreigners come here, rather than we spending foreign exchange on sending our students abroad. So this is also will provide us more. Medical colleges are not only about doctors, you will have more nurses being trained and more paramedical workers being trained. So these are direct benefits. Now, the indirect benefits. Now, they have maintained the capex expenditure, which would last year, probably because of the Lok Sabha election, etc., only for a small amount of the capex for last time, that was about 4 lakh crores was spent. But the rest of it will be spent in the next 3 months plus for the next year, which means better roads, more railways, airports, drinking water, electricity. All of this will help us spread healthcare to distant nooks and corners of India, and also increase the logistics so that we can reach out to them.
Right.
The other benefit that it will indirectly help is what everyone has been discussing about, that the income tax benefits. Now, when you who are the people who are unable to afford health or health insurance or even healthy foods, who go for the cheaper junk food, or who are forced to pay from their pockets and struggle to get health care. These are the middle income group, and so this is a huge help, and this will indirectly mean more they will be able to afford healthcare and they will come for healthcare. So this is an indirect benefit. Same way, when you keep fiscal deficit down to 4.4%, it reduces the inflation, which also helps the poor and the middle income. The inflation most badly affects the poor and then the middle income. And then there are 50 tourist sites which you earlier discussed. Remember, improving tourist sites also improves medical tourism, because when the patient comes here and we operate on them, after that, during the recovery period, they have to hang around in India. So if you have got good tourist areas, not only they, but the people who accompany them will go to those tourist areas and then come back for the follow-up. So it helps us indirectly, improving the
Right.
tourism. So it
Also,
will help medical tourism also.
yeah,
One
which is
other
also
point.
found mention in the speech made by Nirmala Sitharaman when she was announcing the budget. I'm going to come back to you, Jayant Krishna, and understand from you about there has been in every single aspect that has been touched upon in the budget, a strong focus has been on industry and job creation, skill development. They are all three of them interlinked. One without the other cannot function with success. How much of it do you think can now be translated and implemented to allow for results to be seen?
See, to my mind, India's aspiration to become a major manufacturing hub and our efforts on the skill development front, they are interlinked. If you look at in the COVID period, when a lot of multinational companies were trying to relocate part of their manufacturing supply chains to destinations other than China, where India was a front runner, right? So some of those investments, of course, have come to India, but India has not been able to capitalize that opportunity to an extent it could have capitalized, right? I think one reason is, of course, the ease of doing business, the hunger, our politicians and bureaucrats show to solicit those investments, and secondly is also on skill development front. While a lot of excellent work has happened in the services industry, not as much good work has happened in cutting edge technologies. If you look at Industry 4.0 technologies, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, these are the kind of areas where the country still lacks focus on skilling our youth. I'm happy at least Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, she announced 5 national centers of excellence for skilling, and she very clearly said as a part of her budget speech itself that these will happen along with the foreign collaboration, because many of these technologies, especially when it comes to teaching people, it doesn't exist in the country. So I think collaborating with countries like Germany, countries like Singapore, I think it's very, very important. I see a lot of this entire how do we ensure that our population doesn't remain a curse, it becomes a blessing? I think the country is waiting to reap a rich demographic dividend, and we have to do it at a war footing. This entire dream of India becoming a developed nation by the year 2047, when independent country becomes 100-year-old, cannot happen unless our human development index improves, unless our per capita income improves, and unless the allocation on education and skill development improves.
Yeah.
I think I've still not seen in finer print. In healthcare it improves, in science and technology, research and development it improves. Right now we are among the lowest in these 3 categories among G20 countries. I mean, ease of doing business, while it has improved, I must acknowledge, our rank was 100 plus. Now it has become 63. And I'm sure, the World Bank has perhaps stopped measuring it, but it may have improved by a few points again. But is it good enough? If we are the 5th largest economy, why shouldn't our ease of doing business also not be among the top 5 nations? I think our aspirations have to be very different.
Okay. Okay.
To
All
that
right.
extent, I do feel this
Yeah.
budget was an opportunity to make transformative changes for India's emergence as a developing country. Except a few, bright areas, sparks, I see that opportunity not getting tapped to an extent it could have been tapped. I mean, I somehow expected this budget would be as transformative for the country as the 1991 budget of Dr. Manmohan Singh. That opportunity has been missed. I'm not saying these allocations for these sectors that I talked about can overnight be doubled, but some tinkering, some increase, some jump, could have been made. And education sector, you look at how China transformed its sector. Now in the top 100 universities, there are very large number of Chinese universities. When would our universities be in that category? So I think lot of changes have to happen, and the finance minister, fundamentally, I believe, she has to do whatever it takes, remove all barriers, all roadblocks, which is hindering the growth, be it our regulators. If you look at, We have regulators in every sector, but how fair, how independent, how equitable they are. We need to transform our regulators. Direct tax code, I believe there was some mention, although I didn't personally hear that part of it, but she did talk about introducing that. So if that was the case, I really welcome it. Our
Okay,
legal
okay,
system.
all right, sir. So I'll come back to you on the other aspects that you obviously want to talk about. But Dr. Partha Chatterjee, the point that has been made by Jayant Krishna, skill development, unless our youth is skilled enough, no matter how big the population, it is not going to bring about any dividends. How fast are we? How close are we in closing the gap? Because this has been a perpetual problem. Like there are people who are unemployed in large numbers. There is a massive demand, but somehow this gap just is impossible to close.
Yes. So the skill development has been, a feature of the budgets for the last few budgets, and there's been skill development mission 1, 2, 3, 4, but I don't think we made a lot of progress in the skill development, and part of it is that skill development cannot progress without education. Education and skill development cannot be separated. If you look at how the East Asian countries and China all have developed, they really invested a lot in their education sector to begin with. China, in fact, made school education compulsory in the 1960s. Now, without the basic education, even small complexities, like let's say operating an EPBX telephone, right? That seems to be a difficult task for many. So we need to rethink this whole skill development, that how can we go about doing that and reaching our goal in where we can ensure that all the youth, and remember India is among one of the few countries where the population is really young, and the whole world in some ways is looking towards India to supply human capital.
Right.
And we cannot do that unless we develop the education sector and tie the skills with the education sector at the same time. Yeah.
Is our complete reliance on the MSME sector going to help us reap dividends, keeping in mind that we want to target and become a $30 trillion economy by 2047, or reliance on tertiary sector or the MSME is not something that can be a long-term goal for any government to achieve that?
Well, look, in the last few budgets, there has been a lot of talk about big corporates, particularly through the PLI schemes and so on. So I think the pressure was there all throughout that we need to think about the MSMEs. And remember, MSMEs are quite a large portion of the Indian economy. And the second aspect is that we have been doing a little worse in terms of equity, in terms of equality. And if we just focused on the large corporations, then that would have been worse. So in that sense, again, I think it's a good idea to focus a lot more on the MSMEs so that the gains from the growth can be spread out. But having said that, we really need to think about how we can harness both some of the technologies that we are talking about today. We cannot necessarily be done in small scale. So we really need to also
Which are the other sectors? We talk about MSMEs, but which are these, capital-rich sectors, industries in our country that can be tapped into? One was obviously the big focus that was on shipbuilding and maritime development. That has to be the focus point for any economy to then be successful and be amongst the top 2, top 3, even top 5 of the world economies, and India is far behind, lagging behind in that. But which other sectors can the semiconductor industry be tapped, and how much benefit can be gained out of it? What are these industries? AI has at this point in time been given an impetus, but in a very small measure. When you talk about building centers of excellence on AI in education, that's just a very tiny step. Where when we make comparisons to China and America, they are way far off in the race.
Yeah. See, in terms of all of these technologies, while the government can directly contribute in many ways, but I think more importantly, it has to find a way so that the private corporations and private investment comes in, right? We cannot rely on the government to build an general AI or a fab completely. Though, having said that, I mean, for particularly for a fab, government investment is critical. But if you look at how much investment even US is doing today to ensure that a fab is commissioned in the US, we lag far behind. So you're right in that sense that we need to invest in some of these in much more. However, we have to remember that we have certain advantages and we need to kind of leverage on that rather than targeting something that is unreasonable. Say, for example, in the semiconductor, we do have certain advantage in designing. So can we bolster that? Can we look at how to incentivize companies in design part of it? And maybe when we become very good at that, maybe some manufacturing of semiconductors will be easier or possible within India rather than just trying to target manufacturing semiconductors, which is obviously
Okay.
much more costly. Yeah.
Okay, Ayush Mudgal, coming to you now. How do we keep the balance? Here you have the world's most populous country, where you need to provide, the percentage of youth in the country is the largest in any part of the globe today. You need to provide them jobs, you need to provide job opportunities to them, employment opportunities need to be created. At the same time, you need to make India more entrepreneurial than stick to just the tertiary sector. How do we keep the balance?
No, I think you're absolutely right, Megha. I think removal of unemployment is very key in today's India's growth story. And I think while measures have been announced, around that, I think, and of course, some of the measures that were introduced in today's budget, in terms of boosting the domestic manufacture and increasing our export competitiveness will go a long way. But I think what we need is a proper roadmap to kind of see, how we can boost, our domestic manufacture and value addition. I think we see every year certain changes in the customs duty rate, certain reductions. But I think if we really put our key focus on certain thrust sectors, whether it is EV manufacturing, mobile phone manufacturing, and have a proper 4 or 5 year roadmap on what kind of duty changes, tariff changes, etc. will come. So I think that will at least give a little bit more consistency to our manufacturing competitiveness, our growth story, and accordingly, I think the employment will follow from that.
Okay, Dr. Rao, coming to you, in a scenario where I'm going to once again put focus on the growth rate of the country. Now, do you think this is now not just something that we are content with, but maybe a little bit of a worry as well, because the idea is to grow in double digits, and we've still not been able to reach that in the entirety of our existence as a democracy?
Megha, you have hit upon two important aspects of growth while talking to the other panelists. See, when you talk about GDP, it is based on two factors: growth in population, improvement in productivity or efficiency. Now, the second aspect is where you were talking about education, skill development, and employment. And earlier, Mr. Bijor had commented on that we have had a lot of focus on the skill, on the services industry, and not enough on agriculture and manufacturing industry. So much of your skilling. Remember, sometime back, I think about 2-3 months back, the government had announced a scheme where the government will pay for 1 year of internship of people in the industry. This was a huge step, because we here in hospitals, what we find is many of the people who come trained out of medical colleges, when they come to the hospital, they don't even know how to give an injection, leave alone do anything else. And we have to train them. The whole skills have to be provided there. They have come only with theoretical knowledge. And I think this problem is there across industries. So that whole plan of providing internship for 1 year at government cost in these industries is a huge step towards skilling. And as far as the employment is concerned, of course, the service industry is a huge source of employment, including hospitality and health sectors. But agriculture, the way you can improve employment there is by pushing food processing. Remember, agriculture also includes animal husbandry and fisheries. So these are, and for fisheries, they had recently had a separate project to improve that. So those are all going to help in both employment and skill development. Now, as far as the health itself is concerned, I have already listed the various ways we have helped, but I would also like to point out that the increased credit guarantees for 27 key sectors under the Atmanirbhar, which was announced today, includes many sectors which produce equipment and disposable items for us in the health sector. And I'm sure it also helps in the various other essential sectors that you have already mentioned, like batteries and this thing. Now, more than the chip manufacturing, it is the electronic industry which has been addressed today, which is going to provide you far more employment than the actual chip industry itself. Okay. Chip is more of strategic requirement.
Okay. Quickly, a closing comment then, Dr. Pata. I have to ask you, if I make a comparison to the 2024 budget interim, and then obviously after the government was formed, and then you talk about the budget that has been announced today at 2025. Do you think it was more of a chest thumping exercise last time around? Because I remember, there were these huge subsidies and schemes and funds that were being allocated to the PM Awas Yojana and Swanidhi, and you talk about Ujjwala and Jan Dhan Yojana. Funds were being directly transferred to the accounts of the beneficiaries. Nothing of the sort has been announced in this budget, which means it remains the same and is going to the same policy is going to carry forward for the next 4 years, the period for which it is intended to.
Remember, this budget came not 1 year after, but just a few months after the last full budget, right? So some of those schemes that were announced couldn't probably even be fully implemented till now. So I don't think there was too much room for doing much more in direct benefit transfers. So I don't think that it's in some ways a miss. What I think is absent from this budget compared to the last few budget is the capital expenditure, right? The last few budgets, the government has been very, very gung-ho on the capital expenditure part of the government expenditure. So this time there were no major announcements of infrastructure projects or things like that. Yeah. I think that's something that has definitely changed from the last few budgets to this budget.
Okay, all right. On that note, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast, and thanks for watching NewsX on the special day where we are showing you rolling coverage of Budget 2025.